All right, back to that old Harvard. Got the old power cable out. And you can't really tell, maybe, but this is about 90% less dirt and yuck than used to be in here. All these wires that were just gray from covered in dust are now yellows and greens again. I did not disturb the tape with the signature. It's much more clearly a lily now that doesn't have tape over it. So that's a nice place to start. We got the primaries disconnected, and we'll redo the fuse and power switch wiring. We're going to replace that power switch. The death cap to chassis is gone. This selenium rectifier, the old wires are going underneath the insulation board, so between the insulation board and the chassis, but it's not going to be connected to anything, just leaving it there. I went ahead and replaced the old Astron on the tone circuit with the Jupiter, a preview of what's to come in the rest of the amp. More on red versus yellow Jupiter later. And I've gotten out all the caps which are getting changed out, and the resistors, which were way out of spec. In this case, the only resistors that were way out of spec were the 220Ks, which went here on the bias, the 470 ohm, and the 22K dropping resistors in the power supply. All the others measure within tolerance. That doesn't mean that they're good, it just means that they're not outliers as far as the actual resistance. So I'm going to start repopulating this, starting with a diode here, a silicone diode to replace the selenium. And that 56K actually measures about 62K now. That's probably going to get adjusted, though the owner will be using this with a variac. So once I find what setting on the variac gives about 6.3 volts on the heaters, that's where I'll set the bias. Probably going to be somewhere in between 108 and 114 volts AC. And I'm still waiting on the filter caps to arrive, but I'm going to rebuild the rest of it now. And I'll do the power switch wiring with the new power cable last. And I've got a trick to make the shiny new power switch a little less shiny new. I'll show that later. Oh, and everything else was cleaned quite a bit. Not trying to make it new, just to get old layers of dust and stick them and bits of rust off. So it's a clean old surface versus a grody old surface. Well, we're just 3 filter caps away and a reconditioned power switch, more on that in a moment, from being able to complete this amp. Got the hospital grade power cable there. The owner wanted the Jupiters throughout because they have electrolytics and everything, and they would all be red. And, I talked to him about it, The yellow Jupiters are, in theory, more like the yellow Astrons that were in this originally. These red ones are a copy of the red Astrons from earlier in the 50s, and they have a different construction. But, at the end of the day, once it's not original, it's not original. It doesn't matter if it's yellow or if it's red or if I'd used the Vishay 1813s that I like so much. These will sound good. It will sound a little bit unique. On that note, Jupiter doesn't make 16 microfarad axial caps, but they make a 22. And he chose to use those because he wants the look, and that's fine. It's his money. You won't hear any real difference between 16 and 22. Normally, I would have used a 16 microfarad just like the original on these. I probably would have used Vishay for the smaller electrolytics and Vishay for the films and F&T or MOD for the filters, but we're doing all Jupiter, and that's fine. Got the 1 in 4007 there. The selenium is not connected to anything, but it still has the wires tucked beneath the board, like I said. Got a 5-watt 470R because the old 1 watt had drifted quite a bit, and the old 22K measured 28K. Those things matter. Got some new 220Ks there. Yeah, it'd be hard to tell that those are new and not original to the amp, and I'm pleased with that. I expect I might have to change either this 10K or this 56K, which really measures 62K, to get the bias where it needs to be, but that's easily done. Let's see, I also got a Jupiter here that you already saw on the tone cap. Everything's been cleaned, everything's been tightened, all the pins on the tube sockets have been tightened up a little bit on the octals. A lot of dirt gone. Still says Lily. The masking tape is undisturbed. Grounded power cable, you can see the new chassis connection there, and the ground wire is longer than the hot and neutral, and the neutral is taped off splice to this primary, and this primary will go to the power switch. Now, in a Tupperware tub, I have the new Carling power switch being exposed to some vapor from some white vinegar, and I put the switch in a plastic bag with only the bushing poking through, and I tighten the screws down. So really only the top parts of the threads of the bushing and the toggle are exposed to the vinegar fumes. So the switch itself internally won't be aged and the lugs won't be aged, but the nickel plating will lose a little bit of its new. It'll take about 18 hours for that to happen. Sadly for me, those 18 hours are not billable, because I just, check it every couple hours to see where it's at. Not a big thing. It's the same way I aged the tailpiece and bridge on that 335. And if you're patient, white vinegar will age nickel quite nicely. I don't expect to have any issues with that. I just don't want something too shiny new popping through at the top, and I'll use the original nut. So it should look vintage on the outside, brand new, and more importantly, functional on the inside. So we are just, maybe the caps will arrive tomorrow, at which point that switch will come out of its vinegar fume bath, and we'll finish this up. I'm looking forward to hearing it.